you think of emotion, you think you either have to suppress it or you have to embrace it. And I think there's a way in which you can experience it internally, but you don't have to express it externally. We think through it, we process it, and then we say and do what we intend to do, not what we are doing in terms of a reaction. And I think, like, if you control your emotions, you're very powerful. If you're controlled by your emotions, you're not as powerful.
Hey everyone, welcome back to On Purpose, the #1 health podcast in the world. Thanks to each and every single one of you who come back every week to listen, learn, and grow. Now, you know that I'm always out to find interesting people, fascinating stories, people who you may or may not know, but have made really interesting, powerful decisions that we can all learn from. And today's guest is a friend of mine, someone that I bumped into very recently and we just connected instantly. But at the same time, he's had years of experience as an entrepreneur. I'm speaking about none other than Adam Goldston, who's the co-founder of LA-based Athletic Propulsion Labs, or APL as they're known. And he and his twin brother Ryan, who were former sport collegiate athletes, played both basketball and football at the University of Southern California. And they envisioned creating a company that would provide revolutionary products symbolizing the ultimate intersection, and this is what I love, of luxury and performance. Today, Adam and Ryan are recognized as accomplished inventors with numerous US and foreign patents, including APL's revolutionary load and launch technology. And recently, they were named 2 of the 100 most intriguing entrepreneurs of 2020 by Goldman Sachs. Please welcome to the show my friend and amazing entrepreneur, Adam Goldston. Adam, thank you for being here, man.
Jay, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. I've been a long time listener. Obviously, we're friends, but it's funny because your podcast is one of the only ones that I really listen to, and where I think, like, where I actively listen, because I think there's a difference between passively listening to something, actively listening. And it's so funny that so many of the people, big and smaller, or like not smaller, but like famous
Yeah.
and just more specialized in their avenue, and people that have been important to my personal journey. So like when I listened to the Robert Greene one,
Yeah.
and the first book is in my, I'd say, like, adult life that I ever put like real intention into reading was 48 Laws of Power. And I read it in a moment. Like, I think, like, one of the key things in my personal story is that, like, I have gotten lucky at key specific moments of my life through a decision that I made. And I was sick with pneumonia, and I read Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. And there wouldn't have been another moment where I would have been, again, at home and had the ability to dive into something at such a deep level. And I think the way he talks about power, and like, just in the past, is people think of it as a negative thing, but there's definite positives if you use it to not only help yourself but help others.
Absolutely.
And so that was what my takeaway was. And it was, again, this was years ago, but that was what my takeaway was. And so I just started being more active, more intentional in the way I was thinking about things. And so when I saw that you had him, and then you've had other key people that I've definitely taken pieces of their journey and applied it to mine, like, I love that, because you are like the company that you keep. So I think that was cool for me to see the other day.
I'm so grateful, man. And, you know, we've had so many mutual friends over the last few years who've tried to connect us. And last year it finally happened. It was like Deepika was trying to connect us, and then Audrey was trying to connect us. And it finally happened. And we ended up last year at a pumpkin patch. I think it was just before Halloween or something like that.
Yeah.
And we just had like the best conversation. I walked away going, I need to spend a lot more time with that guy. So I'm so glad that, you know, we're getting to do this, and that we get to mine your mind today and really get inside there. And I want to start with, actually, I watched your short film with Rolls-Royce, and what stood out for me was when you guys talked about how the journey is what defines greatness and not the destination. Now, that's an idea that we're told and we've heard again and again and again. But when you said it, not only did I believe it, I also understood that you're applying it. And I'd love to hear how you've been trying to apply that in your journey as you are still growing towards an incredible destination.
So I think that one of the key things is it wasn't always that wasn't always my thought, and that wasn't always Ryan and I's thought. So I think it's something that we've learned along the journey. And I mean, to backtrack a little bit, I think when you're starting anything, especially when you started at a younger age, as Ryan and I did, we started APL when we were in college. You focus a lot on where you want to end up. You don't necessarily always think about enjoying the ride and enjoying the journey to get there. And I think that, again, like listening to your podcast and the things and the intentions that that you think about, that's been really important to the way that Ryan and I were. So when we started off on our journey, you have these goals, these grand ambitions. We all do, whether it's your day-to-day life or your personal life or what you're doing in your profession. You have these milestones that you're hoping for, that you're wishing for, that you believe can happen. And a lot of times you don't think about what you're doing day in and day out and appreciating what you're doing day in and day out and how those will get you to where you want to go. And so I think that as Ryan and I started to achieve more, as we really started to go further in this journey, a lot of it was happening really quickly, even though we were years in. And we didn't take it for granted, but we took the achievements, took the successes, not just like financial, but just successes as a business, as a brand, and individually. And we said we need to use this to get to the next thing. We need to use this to get to the next thing. I think there was a moment in time, probably 2016, where Ryan and I we had got this big award. We were named Forbes 30 under 30. There was a lot of other things that started going our way, and one thing we hadn't been great at was celebrating the small daily victories and giving ourselves and our team the momentum to go to the next thing instead of just focusing on moving to the next point. And so I think we had to have that realization where we were doing so many things, we were achieving so much, but we didn't have the internal appreciation for what was happening every single day. It just became so consistent that it became normal. And I think that's not positive. I think you need to appreciate your daily journey. You need to appreciate the people around you, what they're contributing to it. And I think that was a key change for us. And so at that moment in time, Ryan and I, and again, key people around us, we made a clear decision that we are going to appreciate what we're doing every single day. We're going to stay inspired by what we want to do in the future. But there is a way to exist mentally in the current plane and in the future plane. And I think there's a delicate balance. And I think for us, we had in the beginning, we didn't have that many victories. And so you had to constantly put in the work, put in the repetition to get that one. But then one of the other key aspects of my story is compounding. And as you get one thing, the next thing comes typically quicker, then the next one comes quicker, the next one comes quicker. And so for us, we tried to slow down the focus on the ultimate endpoint, because you are probably going to get there regardless of what your goals are. If you put in the effort, you put in the work, and you get lucky, you will end up reaching these points. But if you're only focused on that one moment in time that's so finite, and you're not appreciating the longer term, which is actually the day to day and the journey, it's not going to be a win. It's just going to be another accomplishment or milestone, but it won't feel the same. And I think that when we decided to put happiness before success and a measurement for success and that daily happiness, and I know you can't be happy 100% of the time every single day, and the ups and downs do make those other things feel greater. But if you can think every day that I want to appreciate this journey, and what I'm doing today will get me to where I'm going tomorrow, and if I appreciate it today, I will appreciate it tomorrow, and you make those clear conscious decisions, you will feel much better about your journey, and you will feel much better about your destination. But you spend much more time on the journey than you do at the destination. So if you can appreciate the longer part, the part at the end will feel even better. And I think the only way that we were able to realize that was by not realizing that earlier. And so, but it's like anything, it's you learn as you go. And if you keep an open mind and you can take feedback and you can look at others and see that you're inspired by what they're doing, what they've learned, and then how can I take little pieces of that and apply it to what I'm doing. And I saw other people that were enjoying simpler things than I was, and I appreciated that. And so I said, there's a way that I need to implement that into my daily life, as did Ryan and the rest of the team. And I mean, we feel great about what we do, and I think that's the most important thing, and that's the key to enjoying the journey, which helps you enjoy the destination even more.
I think that was such a comprehensive answer because, like I said, it's a statement we've heard, it's a statement we've seen, but I really appreciate your interpretation of that and how practical you've made it, because I feel the same way. I always say to people, like, winning the award or getting the title, that's 1% of the journey. Like, that amount of time you spend on stage is like 30 seconds long.
Yeah.
And those 30 seconds, it took like 3 years, 30 years, to get to that 3 seconds or 30 seconds of time that you spent receiving an award. And you're spot on. Like, if you don't feel passionate when you wake up every morning to do what you're doing, can you take me back, Adam? I want to go back. What I love about this conversation is I'm discovering you. I think the world is discovering you. I know me and my friends are massive fans of APL. I had a ton of your shoes before I even knew you. Not only are they comfortable, they look fantastic. The store at the Grove is one of my favorite stores just generally to walk into, which was where I was first introduced to APL. But let's go back to your childhood. I'm intrigued by, can you think about a pivotal moment that happened while you were young that has framed who you are today? Was there a particular experience, maybe with a parent, with a friend, anyone in your life, something someone said, something someone did that has created part of who you are today that you feel has been so integral in your life, positive or negative, or, healthy or unhealthy?
I mean, I think there's a lot of things, so it's hard to point to one. I think one thing I realized early on, and I know this isn't applicable to most because they aren't twins, but and so I'll choose one that's more applicable to other people. But I realized early on, as did my brother, that we had a unique competitive advantage. That there was two of us with almost identical points of view, but with unique characteristics that complement one another. So we realized that really early on. And again, like a lot of times with kids, peer pressure is something that becomes really, really difficult. And because there's two of us and there's typically one other person, we could not be pressured to move one way. So I think like that played a role in terms of like building internal character. But I think something that was key to my journey is I've always believed, always now as an adult, but I think this because of a kid, was that you can turn a negative situation into a positive if you change your perspective on the negative and try to skew it more positive. And so I guess one real important example is when I was a kid, I didn't do great in school. And I was always an incredible athlete, but I did not do the greatest in school. And it wasn't because I didn't have the intellect, but it's because I wasn't in the right, it wasn't important to me in the situation that I was in. So I was at this one school and I was not doing very well. I was doing great at sports, but I wasn't doing very well as a student. And I felt like the environment wasn't the right one for me because it was too it was too small. I needed to be able to become more of myself. I always had this like a nagging self-confidence that I knew where if I trusted myself and I listened to myself, I could make the most of it. And so middle of my ninth grade year, my parents basically gave me the opportunity to transfer to a school that wasn't as good of a school, but it was more diverse. It had a greater opportunity for educational and athletic success. And I changed my environment. And again, like one thing that's been important to our journey is changing your environment when you believe you need to. And so that gave me the ability to go to a school at a different part of the city in a different environment. And then I was able to learn at a better rate. I was able to do sports at a much higher level. And I believed in myself because it's hard switching schools in the middle of the year, trying to make all new friends and things of that nature. And so I think like the key learning point from that is like if you get out of your comfort zone and you become comfortable with the uncomfortable, you may discover something in yourself that you never knew you could do, or take it to a level that you didn't think was possible. And so for me, that was a really big one. And I think it was if that doesn't happen, I'm not here today. And so I think that movement in the middle of my ninth grade year, I was a young man. I'm 14, 15 years old, but that gave me the confidence to try uncomfortable situations, make the most of it. And then they may actually end up benefiting you much more than you ever could have thought. So that was, I think, as a kid, something that went a really, really, really long way.
Yeah, that's such a great insight because you almost don't get to reap the rewards of that up until now, like much later on.
Of
In that
course.
in that moment, you're just like, this is the worst thing that could have ever happened to me, right? And I really do love that you reflected on that moment in that way because I find that anytime I ask someone that question, rarely do they pick something good that happened, right? It's like people never say, "Oh, when I was 15, I had the best thing." It's always like, "Well, this went wrong or this changed and this shifted." And I think it's fascinating to hear that in your journey too. Now, when you and your brother, and by the way, I love the twins answer. I love the twins answer.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter that we can't relate. We all want to relate. Like we're like, "Oh, that's so cool." Like, that's how I felt when you have this idea for APL, and I want to talk about the idea, but what I'm really interested by is also how lots of people start stuff at college or at school, and it kind of fizzles out by the time you graduate, and then you go on to get a real job and you get
Yeah.
real responsibilities and you wear a real suit, right? Like that kind of becomes the journey that most people go on. What I'm fascinated by is when you come up with this idea, what did it take to go from this is cool to this is real? And what was that journey like? So tell us about the ideation, but then tell us about how this went from like, this is cool, we're doing something interesting, to this is actually real and this is what we're going to commit time to.
So I think one of the important things about Ryan and I is that if somebody tells us we're not able to do something, that's essentially just gasoline to what we have to do. So I think Ryan used APL as his business plan in school, and he didn't even get top 10. So I don't remember what the grade is. He still has it, but like he didn't even get top 10. They didn't believe in it. And it's not because they didn't think it was a good idea. It's because they didn't think that we could execute on the vision the way that we did. And so I think one of the things I used to have as a kid and when I was in college, I don't have it anymore because it's more so like a running tally that I keep in my mind, is I would have this list of things that we had to do and that I wanted to do. Top thing on my list I never achieved, which was making the NBA. Everything else I've done since then. But I think when thinking about the idea and execution, one thing I heard, and again, I think one of the parts of my story that's important is I've heard important things at the right moment in time and I've listened to it. And I heard the easiest way to get where you're going is one step at a time. And so when I was in college and when Ryan and I were, and we were thinking through the idea, one of the things, again, back to the journey aspect, is you think of where you want to go, but you don't necessarily usually think of the steps you need to take in the interim to get there. And so Ryan was lucky enough that when he was in this program and people were telling us this wasn't a good idea, it's not going to work, we had to think deeper through the idea, deeper through the execution. And I mean, we started as a direct to consumer brand in 2010. So it's like in 2010, people were not going direct to consumer, but we didn't have the resources. And I think one of the things that a lot of people think when they're creating something is everybody's paying attention to me. If I fail, everyone's going to see it. But most of the time, everybody else is focused on themselves and they're not really concerned with what you're doing. So if you focus on yourself, you focus on what you're doing and you try something, if you mess up, there's a way to recover it and there's a way to keep moving forward. You learn from it, you won't make the same mistake again. And so for us, like we spent so much time working on this technology, we wanted to build a shoe around it. And one thing we did, and I think this is what helped us be successful and go from idea to execution, is again, most people, when they're creating something, they are scared to ask for help typically, and they don't go to the highest level of help. They try to go to the lowest level because they think somebody that's close to me will help me, not somebody at the top somewhere. And so what Ryan and I believed is if we went to the largest people possible and said, we have this amazing idea, it's remarkable, we can't execute on this, we will put the work in to do it, can you help us? And they said yes. We went to sneaker factory that had no business saying yes to us, but they thought they loved the idea. They thought it was unique. And so from there, we were able to implement what we wanted to do, be able to develop things that typically you would not be able to. And so I think, again, like the nugget of our journey, because we make shoes, so most people aren't going to make shoes. And that's the part that's different, is that we believe that if you ask people for help and you're willing to accept their help and you go to somebody that typically you wouldn't think would say yes, and you give them the opportunity to help you, people inherently want to help. And so I think when you're thinking about executing something, you shouldn't, you have to think big. You can always, it's easier to work your way down than it is to work your way up. And so that was the way that we looked at it. And again, it's just, we had an idea of how we wanted to execute it. We asked the right questions to people. And we didn't have this idea of you have to have a specific mentor. We believe that you could have specific mentors for specific things. So if I needed help with production, I would ask a production person. If I needed help with logistics, I would ask a logistics person. If I needed help with accounting, I would ask an accounting person. But there's not an end all be all for each thing. So that was really what a point of difference for us was. We were able to ask help. We had amazing people that were around us when in that moment in time, and we just had pure determination. Like we were obsessed with taking this idea and executing it, and we were going to do whatever it took. And since we didn't have any investors, we had to do it ourselves. And so I think, and we weren't scared to fail. Like that's another thing, is that there's a real difference between fear and danger. And when you're starting an idea, it's all fear. It's not dangerous. You're scared of it. So you just have to conquer that emotion, and you can learn most things if you ask questions to the right people.
Adam, you are just dropping wisdom everywhere. I mean, there's so many things in that I need to now break down. So first of all, everyone who's listening, you need to get your notebook out right now and write stuff that Adam is saying down, because there are so many things. Or you're going to have to listen to this episode twice. So it's up to you. You either listen to the episode twice or you get a notebook out right now. The idea that there's a difference between fear and danger, what a great way to clarify how we experience it. That's just brilliant. Like I've never heard it been put in that way before. And I think that is such great language to help us realize we react as if we're in danger, but actually we're in fear. And that's where things start to go wrong. So I thought that was brilliant. The other thing that you mentioned that I really am resonating with, and it was kind of in there, and I think it's an underrated part of entrepreneurship, is that you were trying, and you have, of course, now, but at the time, you were trying to create technology. Like there was an engineering aspect. It wasn't just, we want to make cool stuff and trendy stuff and faddy stuff. It was like, no, we're actually working on something. And I find that one of the most underrated things about entrepreneurship is people with deep skill sets and having a skill, whether it's with innovation, technology, engineering, speaking, marketing, whatever it may be. Talk to me a bit about, where did you learn about technology when it comes to athletics? Because that to me is a really different way to look at product creation, as opposed to just saying we want to make stuff that looks good.
So back to, I think, a unique competitive advantage. And since we don't have 10 hours, I didn't want to give you the full background. But as a kid, my dad worked in the footwear industry, and he actually helped, like one of the key parts to my story is he helped create the LA Gear lighted shoes. And so my brother and I were the first product testers ever for the LA Gear lighted shoes. And he brought them home and he gave them to us. And that day we gave him feedback on, and we're 5 years old. We gave him feedback on how to try to make the shoes better. And obviously we're not giving him technical feedback at 5, but we're telling him you should move the lights from the back to the side of the shoe so we can see our lights. But the technical aspect of it is, from a very, very, very young age, my dad would bring us to the office and would bring us into the technology line reviews, would bring us into the innovation area, and we would see how to engineer specific footwear product. So I think, again, it wasn't that Ryan and I woke up one day and decided that we wanted to engineer a technology that would instantly make you jump higher. We have been obsessed with footwear specific technology since we were 5 years old. And again, when you're talking, you asked earlier about key moments in my childhood. My dad as a kid showed me what was possible, not saying come here and look at this, but through ideas. And I think like that's the greatest type of inspiration you can get for anybody, not just from a parent, but from anyone, is showing somebody that something is possible through their own ideas and execution. So we took an interest to developing footwear technologies from an age of 5 years old. Obviously, there was a lot of knowledge that needed to come afterwards and took years to get. And we weren't 8-year-old whiz kids. We were eight-year-old with ideas. But as you become older, as you become smarter, you focus on the things that are important to you. And sports and technology, and specifically footwear-based technologies, were things that were always important to us. So I think that the learning point about that for entrepreneurs is that everybody, regardless of what you do, has a predisposition to a specific thing that they care about, that they're passionate about, and they can focus on. If you can learn enough information, you can figure out how to make something better. And that was basically the basis for how we did it, is that we believed that we could make a shoe that were in a technology that would do what we wanted to do. We just had to learn the basis behind the fundamentals. And that's what we did, and that's how we focused on it. That's how we learned it. And to this day, I continue to learn so much, not only from our own exploration into footwear, but from other people, what they teach us and things they bring to the table. And I think that I learned at a really, really young age. And I think it's the fact that my dad and the team listened to our idea, and then I saw it actually come into life. And so I think seeing what's possible and knowing that if you're passionate about something, you don't have to be a scientist to necessarily figure it out. You just have to be a creative engineer. And I think like that's a lot of really successful entrepreneurs. It's not that they know something about everything, it's that they know a lot about a specific area. And for us, like it's always been our passion. We've always loved technology, and we've always loved innovation and pushing what's possible. And I think that regardless of what your avenue is, even if you're not creating product, if you're creating content, if you're creating anything, like there's a way to be innovative in it, and there's a way to push it to as far as you possibly can.
Yeah, I'm so glad you shared that detail, because to me, that's the part that I love my community really getting close to, because when you've been that close to something since you're 5 years old and you've taken an interest, that closeness has turned into a passion, and then it's turned into your own cause. That's what it takes. Like that's what it takes. Like it takes that obsession, that absorption, that you're immersed in this whole world. It's not like one day you wake up and you have a random idea to go and create something, right? And I think often we don't give ourselves the time to get close to something and deeply immerse in it and experience it. And we're looking for like, well, I don't know what I'm passionate about. Like, I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what I'm excited about. But that's because we're trying to hope that it's just going to miraculously appear. And I love that idea that actually, well, no, this has been a part of our life. Now, when we talk about technology, your load and launch technology became the first banned shoe in the NBA history, right?
Yeah.
And that is just so, like, that is, I don't know if there's anything cooler than that. Like I don't know if it's better to get into the NBA or to get in and get banned to get banned by the NBA. To me, that sounds like the coolest story ever. But as a company, it can also be difficult. I want to hear, what was that like to find out? Like, what was that like as an experience? Because that's not common. Like, I don't hear stories like that all the time.
So I think the unique part about that is that to this day, we've never raised $1 of outside capital. We own 100% of the business. And at that moment in time, we had $0. And when I mean zero, we had $0 for marketing. And so we looked at it as the NBA is the greatest basketball organization in the world. It's top tier. And when you think about leagues, it's top tier. And so the dream when you're creating a product for a specific sport is you want it to be at the top tier with the best people. And the fact that the NBA said that it's too good because it provides a wearer with an undue competitive advantage, that sounds really positive when you frame it that way. But if you look at it from the other side of the coin, saying the best basketball players in the world can't wear your product, that sounds negative. And so the way that we looked at it is that this is a very unique opportunity where we can wholeheartedly embrace it, or we can fight it with everything that we have, which wasn't much at the time. And we said, let's embrace this. Let's turn this negative into a positive. Let's say banned by the NBA. The reason is it instantly makes you jump higher, and they can't wear it because it's so good. And so there's a way to, again, you change your perspective on something. You take a negative, you make it a positive, ends up becoming the best thing that ever happened to us. When it happened, number one news story in the world, number 2, 3, and 17 most search terms on Google, over 1 million articles written or posted about it within 10 days. We sold 9 months worth of inventory in 3 days, which is important because we're self-financed, no outside investors. And there's 3 of us in a room that's 60 square feet when we find this out. So we basically find out that the world leading basketball organization isn't allowing our product because it provides a wearer with an undue competitive advantage. So I think at first there's that huge shock, like, oh man, this is insane. Like, what do we do? And then instantly we thought, we need to lean into this. We need to embrace this. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. We can make this negative feel positive. And that's exactly what we did. And again, I think one thing that made it special too is that if we would have fought it, I think the NBA would have fought us. But the fact that we embraced it, made them embrace us. Like, even like David Stearns passed away, but he went on a show, I think, like that night and said, like, we're looking into the shoe that instantly makes you jump higher. It might even make me dunk. And like the way that he said it, it was playful, even though it was a very serious thing that they weren't allowing people to wear it. But I think the fact that we leaned into it and we embraced this thing that could have been negative, changed the perspective of it, made it positive, and it made the people that were essentially saying no lean into it and embrace it as well. So it ended up being a huge win for all of us. I actually think it was the only time, obviously it's changed since, that the NBA was the number one trending topic on Twitter when there wasn't like a number one trending sports organization on Twitter when there wasn't another thing. So I think that they saw that there was value in the social equity that came along with it. We leaned into a negative, made it positive. We felt positive about it. We reaped the benefits of it because we sold the product. And then the NBA also got the reward from it. So I think all in all, it was a tremendous experience, and it literally laid the groundwork for where we are today. And if that doesn't happen again, I mean, one of the key things, sorry, if that doesn't happen, I don't know where we end up today. And we made the most of a negative and turned it into a positive.
That's a true win-win-win. And what I find so fascinating about it is that this is kind of like a recurring pattern in your life. Like, your superpower is the ability to transform a negative into a positive and to be able to pivot. Like, that's really a superpower, because even today, you don't make basketball shoes, even that's what you started making. Like, there's just another pivot, right? There's expansion, there's growth. Like, I find that that's sometimes the hardest thing to do. And going back to what you said before is the only thing you never got to do was make it in the NBA. There's another pivot there as well. Now, Anna, tell me how good were you? How serious were you? And how close were you?
Well, so I mean, I was a Division I athlete. I played basketball at USC. I think I had a rude awakening when I got to college that I wasn't going to make the NBA because a few of my teammates did make the NBA, and I realized that they were much better than I was, and that I wasn't going to be able to get there. But I think too, one of the points that you were just making, and it's important to our journey, is that typically when you think of emotions and like this turning negatives into positives, you think of emotion, you think you either have to suppress it or you have to embrace it. And I think there's a way in which you can experience it internally, but you don't have to express it externally. And so I think like what we've done in these negative situations is we think through it, we process it, and then we say and do what we intend to do, not what we are doing in terms of a reaction. And I think like for me, that's been super important to my journey. It's been super important for Ryan and I, and something that again, it became a superpower because if you control your emotions, you're very powerful. If you're controlled by your emotions, you're not as powerful. And so I think like that was something that we learned really early on. But to your basketball question, I wish I would it could have been 6'10" and had a different journey in terms of that, but everything works out the way that it's supposed to. So if I would have made the NBA, I probably wouldn't be on your podcast here today. So I'm thankful for the journey that I've had.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, maybe you would. Maybe we've had some, I'm trying to think now, who have we had from the NBA? We've had,
You had Dwayne Wade on. I know that.
I just interviewed Dwayne, who was amazing. We had Dennis Rodman on a couple of years ago, which was just fascinating conversation. Obviously, thankful to have had the opportunity to sit with Kobe Bryant. So maybe Adam, maybe it would have happened that way too. We would have been brought together either way. But no, I really appreciate this message, this pattern that's coming out through your whole journey of pivoting, of looking for being able to turn a situation, something that looks like a failure or looks like a rejection, and being able to turn that into a win. And sure, it's easy to celebrate that now, but you can only imagine when the news is the biggest organization in the world that is your target market to help promote and propel this brand is saying you're not allowed. And that as a product creator can be really, really challenging. When you think about it, it's almost like saying, this company's not going to stock your thing, or we're not going to allow, and so I love the way that I'm hearing this through your journey and how it's constantly shifted. I want to hear, how do you and your brother make decisions? Have you created because when I even met you, what I experienced from you is you're very methodical, strategic, very thoughtful.